Good afternoon, grade 11s. I'm going to do type 2 and type 3 together of the general solutions so that you can actually spot the difference between the two. You will notice that type 2 is called a name change. You can only do a name change when you identify that the angles are exactly the same and that there's sine on the left-hand side and cos on the right-hand side. Remember, type 1 has only got one function. Type 2 will have two functions. One will be sine, one will be cos, and the angles will be the same. So your method will be to divide by the cos of that angle on both sides. So if you divide both sides by the cos of 2 theta minus 10, what do you notice? That cancels out to give you -1. Now, because the angles are the same, you can do a name change, and that's a sine of the angle over cos of that same angle will change into the tan of that angle. Then remember the definitions that we had to learn in the beginning, the three types. This is tan. You only have to do one angle for tan because of the period being 180. You take tan across and you will calculate the arctan of -1. The minute you introduce that, you must introduce the period of the graph. You then pick up your calculator, calculate the arctan of -1, and you land up with -45 degrees. Remember, the people who do reference angle, you won't get -45, you'll probably get 45 degrees. You then take the -10 across, which will become +10. And then you will divide by 2, and you will land up with -17,5 plus 90 degrees K. Remember to write K element of Z1s. Okay, remember this is just the general solution. I didn't want specific answers. In comparison, let's do a type 3. A type 3, if I take that question the first thing you will notice is that it has the same concept, that there are two functions, sine and cos, on either side of the equal sign. The only difference is that the angles are different. Now, because the angles are different, you cannot use that same method where you change it into tan. So now you've got to do the Coco rule. Now you can decide which side you want to change. I normally like to change the right-hand side, but that's your choice. So I'm going to change both of my functions into sine. Remember, the purpose of the Coco rule is to make sure that the functions are the same. So you know that everything is positive in the first quadrant, so you could write it as 90 minus that specific angle. I repeat again, I'm changing the right-hand side. I'm not changing the angle. What I'm doing is I have to introduce the same function on both sides, because the purpose of that will be to cross it out. Where do I know that sine lives? Is in the first quadrant. If you'd put 90 plus here, you would also get the same correct answer. Once you've got both functions the same on either side, remember, I must be able to go backwards. Remember the rule of cofunctions. Sine of 90 minus is the first quadrant. Sine in the first quadrant is positive. Sine, because I'm using 90, changes into cos. Remember, this arrow is dual purpose. It goes backwards and forwards. I then cross out the sine, and because my functions were sine, I'll have to do the first and the second quadrant. On my left-hand side, I have 2 theta minus 10 equals to 90 degrees minus 3 theta. I then add my 360K here the minute I cross it out. Bring the angles together, so you will have 5 theta equals to 100 plus 360K. I then will divide both sides by 5, and I will get 20 degrees. What's 360 divided by 4? 72 degrees. Okay, so that's the general solution for the first quadrant. Now I must go into the second quadrant, back here, not at this step, back here. So 2 theta minus 10 equals 2. In the second quadrant, I've got to use 180 minus that. And then, of course, I introduce the 360k. Do my distributive law. 180 minus 90 is 90. Plus 3 theta plus 360k. Bring your angles together so you get negative theta. Bring your numbers together, which makes it 100. Divide by negative. And again, introduce k element of z. Okay, so this would be the general solution. If I wanted a specific answer, I would have to give you a domain to work from. Okay, these are the two types. Type 2 is a name change. Sine and cos are the two functions. On either side of the equal sign, angles are the same. Type 3, sine and cos on either side, but the angles are different. Because of that, I've got to apply the Coker rule. Remember, the definitions I'm using here for 1 and 2 is based on the original cast diagram. I change it to sine. Sine is positive in the first and the second. Here, tan has only one definition because of the period being only 180. I'll also post homework on this. Thanks.